Good morning.
Good morning.
I had a sermon ready for the gospel today, but talks about how the Pharisees and the Sadducees, or the Herodians, they were going to try to entangle Jesus in his words. And people do that a lot. They're always trying to entangle us in our words. And but that's not what I ended up doing. Sometimes when you're working on a sermon, the sermon should always speak to you as well. And I don't know if it's because I've been sick or what, but it just wasn't clicking for me. So I went to something different. And the title of this sermon is called Thriving at 85. Now, I'm not 85. But I'm starting to realize it's getting closer and closer to me. And so today's sermon is on Joshua chapter 14, verses 6 through 14. And it talks of a man named Caleb who is just getting started at the age of 85. And so let's begin by reading what he had to say to Joshua, what God had to, or what Caleb had to say to Joshua. He says to Joshua, and I realized that they had just entered into the promised land. They'd been there for a little bit. And he had some things he still wanted to do. Even though he was 85, there was some areas that he wanted to conquer. And so it says, you know what the Lord said to Moses, the man of God, at Cades Bernalillo, about you and me. I was 40 years old when Moses, the servant of the Lord, sent me from Cades Bernalillo to explore the land. And I brought him back a report according to my convictions. But my fellow Israelites who went up with me made the hearts of the people melt in fear. I, however, get this, followed the Lord my God wholeheartedly. So on that day Moses swore to me, the land on which your feet have walked will be your inheritance, and that of your children forever, because you have followed the Lord my God wholeheartedly. Now then, just as the Lord promised, he has kept me alive for 45 years since the time he said this to Moses, while Israel moved about in the wilderness. So here I am today, 85 years old. I am still as strong today as the day Moses sent me out. A lot of us sometimes feel that way. I'm just as vigorous to go out to battle now as I was then. Now give me this hill country. Give me this mountain that the Lord promised me that day. You yourself heard then that the Anakites were there and their cities were large and fortified. But the Lord helping me, I will drive them out just as he said. And then Joshua blessed Caleb, son of Jephunneh, and gave him Hebron as his inheritance. And so Hebron has belonged to Caleb, son of Jephunneh, to the Kenizzites ever since, because he followed the Lord, the God of Israel, wholeheartedly. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen. I appreciate Caleb and his exploits more today than I did 20 years ago. I'm only 26 years behind Caleb. And I'm closing the gap every day. And in that spirit, I'd like to share a few excerpts from something I found on the internet. It's called 51 Signs You're Getting Older. The large print edition. You know you're getting older when everything hurts, and what doesn't hurt doesn't work. You know you're getting older when the gleam in your eyes is from the sun hitting your bifocals. Or you know you're getting older if you sit in a rocking chair and can't get it going. Or your knees buckle, but your belt won't. You know you're getting older when you sink your teeth into a steak and they stay there. You know you're getting older when you're asleep, but others worry you're dead. That didn't sound funny to you? You know you're getting older when you enjoy hearing about other people's operations. And you know you're getting older when your back goes out more than you do. And then you know you're getting older when your ears are hairier than your head. I don't have that problem myself. Someone said old age is when you've got it all together, but you can't remember where you put it. So let's talk about Caleb, an old man who had it all together, but he knew where he put it. In the Bible, some men stand out above others. You have Moses outshine Joshua, yet Joshua, not Moses, conquers the promised land. Joshua outshines Caleb, yet Caleb, not Joshua, defeats the giants. Caleb has been called Mr. Greatheart, which sounds right to me because 6 times we are told Caleb wholeheartedly followed the Lord. He was a mighty warrior for God. So what happened at Cades Bernalillo? This is one of the most famous stories in the Bible. And Moses sent out 12 spies, if you can remember, one from each tribe to scout out the promised land. And after 40 days, the men came back with good news and bad news. The spies reported that the land was flowing with milk and honey. They brought back grapes and pomegranates so the people could sample them. The promised land lived up to its name. It was worth the long trek through the wilderness. That was the good news. But the bad news was, it was much worse. The cities were filled with the hostile Canaanites who lived behind walls that seemed to stretch to heaven. Furthermore, there were giants in the land, a host of physically intimidating bad guys who made the Jews feel like grasshoppers. 10 of the spies concluded there was no way that the Jews could successfully take the land. They would have to find some other place to live, because if they invaded Canaan, they would certainly be defeated. 2 of the spies disagreed with them. Their names was Joshua and Caleb. They saw what the others saw, but they also remembered God's promise to go with them and give them victory. Because the people gave in to their fear, they were sentenced to wander for 40 years in the wilderness, where the unbelieving generation died off. And there's many lessons here, including the obvious one that the majority is not always right. Often the majority is dead wrong. In this case, they were not only wrong, all 10 of the unbelieving spies ended up dead and never made it to the promised land. While the people were making up their minds, Caleb made this impassioned plea in Numbers chapter 14, verse 9. He said, Be not rebellious against the Lord, and fear ye not the people of this land, for we are able to eat them up as bread. All aid is gone from them. The Lord is with us. Fear ye not. That phrase, we are not able to eat them up or eat up as bread. The meaning there is we're going to eat them up. We're going to have them for breakfast. God promised we could have this land. And if we go in there, no matter how big they are, no matter what it looks like, we're going to eat them for breakfast. He was 40-something years old at that time. That's how a true man of God would talk. Too many priests get up and don't say anything anymore. But Caleb got up and spoke with authority. Caleb saw the problems. He saw the same walls and the same giants the 10 spies did. It's not as if he's denying their report. He knows it's going to be a tough fight. But Caleb had a big God. And he understood that one man plus God equals a majority. But because the people gave in to their fears and were afraid to fight, they wandered in the desert for 40 years. And slowly, the whole unbelieving generation died off. And the only ones left was Joshua and Caleb. So now we're going to fast forward 45 years. After Moses died, Joshua led the new generation across the Jordan River. Jericho falls, and then Ai, and then they conquer the cities to the south and then the north. And now it's time to divide the land and settle in. And here comes Caleb. He's 85, but he acts like he's 45 still. And this story reminds me of those supplement commercials that I used to see on TV. Do you remember them with Frank Thomas talking about how some pill has given him new energy and stamina? I also like the one set in a restaurant where a young wife is urging her husband to start a workout program. And then Tim Tebow happens to be sitting in the next booth. And when he overhears the conversation, he urges the young man to check out his personal training program, whereupon the wife says to her husband, "You should do whatever he's doing." And we all need whatever supplement Caleb was taking or whatever program he was following, because he was still going strong at 85. How was he able to do that? Well, he believed once a soldier, always a soldier. He hadn't retired yet in his mind. He was ready to fight. And consider what God said about Caleb in Numbers 14, verse 24. God says about Caleb, "My servant Caleb, who being full of another spirit, has followed me." God looked at Caleb and said, "This man is different. He's not like the others. He has a different spirit." And that's the secret of his life. Number one, he believed God when others wouldn't. Peer pressure can be good or it can be bad. It's never easy to go against the crowd, especially when your friends are going another direction. If the people you know say it can't be done, it's hard to stand up and say, "Well, you're wrong." At Cades, Bernalillo, it was Joshua and Caleb against the whole nation. Now, I understand why Israel followed the doubters. I'm sure they were persuasive with all their talk of walled cities and giants that made them feel like grasshoppers. Fear is contagious. And who wants to enter a battle thinking there is no way you can win? That's how the Israelites felt. Besides, how could 10 men get it so totally wrong? Who are you going to believe? The 10 or the 2? Who are you going to believe? Those bishops and cardinals who are going against God and allowing sin and saying everybody is okay and we all should love each other? Or are you going to go against the few or go with the few who says, no, it's still sin. Things are still sin. We need to speak the truth. We need to let people know that there's a heaven and a hell, and they're going to go to one or the other. If human nature for people, it's just human nature for people to follow the naysayers. And that doesn't make it right, but it helps us understand what happened. If enough people repeat a lie, pretty soon the lie begins to sound like the truth. And that's how you get fake news. It sounded perfectly reasonable, and from a purely human point of view, the 10 spies were right. The Jews didn't stand a chance on their own, but God had said, "I will go with you." And that changes the odds instantly. If God goes with you, how can you lose? That's the whole point of it. Give Caleb the credit that he deserves. When the whole nation gave in to fear, Caleb and Joshua stood alone against the multitude. And they were right, and the majority was dead wrong. And then number 2, he never let go of God's promise. Number 1 was he believed God when others wouldn't. Number 2, he never let go of God's promise. Caleb was 40 years old when Moses sent out the 12 spies to check out the promised land. And after the children of Israel made the wrong choice and heard all their complaints. Their complaints were, I wish we were back in Egypt. I'm sick of this manna and quail. Why are we going in circles? Moses stinks as a leader. If I were in charge, I'd get this thing organized. You can read Numbers, it's all there. The people complained and they moaned and they griped, and the whole 40 years must have tired Moses out. And I'm sure Joshua and Caleb got tired of the constant complaining as well. But now they're in the promised land, and Moses is dead, and the unbelieving generation is dead. General Joshua has led them to a long string of victories. The whole land stretches out in front of them. And after 45 years, Caleb steps back on the stage of biblical history. He's an old man now, way past retirement age, but someone forgot to tell him he was too old. So he said, "Give me the hill country." He had his eyes set on a hill country, a place called Hebron. When Abraham died, the only land he owned was the sacred burial ground at Machpelah in Hebron. He bought it from the Ephron, the Hittites, for 400 shekels of silver. And you can see this in Genesis 23. And Abraham purchased the land so he could bury his wife Sarah. And over the years, it became the final resting place for many of Israel's founders. Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, Rebekah, Jacob, Leah. They were all buried there. Famous people to the Israelites. And that land was taken over. Hebron was in the hands of a pagan Canaanites. And as far as Caleb was concerned, that land belonged to God's people. And at 85, he intended to take it back. Why did he say, I want that mountain, I want that hillside? He said it because he never let go of God's promise. And he never forgot what that land meant. At an age when most men are slowing down, Caleb was just getting started. He had the pedal to the metal, and he wasn't about to ease up. And we can't give up either in our spiritual lives. We have to keep going. We have to put the metal to the pedal. We have people out there who have taken our faith and destroyed it. And it's our job, no matter how old we are, to keep the faith, to hold it up, to show people what the faith is and what God has promised us if we keep the faith. And then lastly, number 3, he wholeheartedly followed the Lord. This fact explains Caleb's success. 6 times in Numbers and Joshua, we are told he wholeheartedly, completely followed the Lord. It's not a time of retirement for him. It's not a time for him to go play golf half the day, the other half a day go to Mass and do a few little things here and there. He gave his whole life was wholeheartedly at 85 given to the Lord. Great men tend to be simple men. They are men captured by one big idea. Weak men have divided loyalty so they can never commit with a whole heart to anything. They are here, there, and everywhere all the time. They are never totally committed to anything. But Caleb was a simple man at the core. He believed God, he remembered his promises, and in his old age he was ready to claim what God had promised him. When others were pulled 7 different ways, he wholeheartedly followed the Lord. And Caleb didn't consult the daily tracking polls to decide whether he would believe what God said. He didn't stick his finger up to see which way the wind was blowing. For that matter, he didn't ask his friends what they were going to do. Every day when he got up, he determined in his heart to follow the Lord. And in that sense, he's the exact opposite of the double-minded man of James chapter 1, verses 6 through 8. Tossed to and fro by the winds of popularity and public opinion. The double-minded man can never make up his mind about anything. And we have a lot of double-minded men in this world, in our church, and in our families, and in this world. But Caleb was different. If God said, the younger generation makes fun of the older generation, but it's a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times, it's the older generation who is sticking to this stuff and doing the right thing. And it's so important to show respect to the older generation because they've been where they're at and they've learned to follow God. Caleb was different. If God said, take the land, Caleb said, grab your swords, boys. It's time to go to war. 85 years old. He didn't let anything distract him from doing God's will. So what really happened back at Cades Barnea? 10 spies said, look how big those giants are compared to us. And Caleb said, look how small they are compared to God. His eyes were focused on the right person. Look how big those giants are compared to us. And Caleb says, look how small they are compared to God. The cowards said, they are too big for us to fight. But Caleb said, they are too big to miss. We need that spirit today. We got plenty of nice people. We got plenty of nice Catholics who get along to get along. They want to stand for Christ, but they're worried about what others will think. They intend to take a stand, but when the time comes, they are nowhere to be found. They are what we would call summer soldiers and sunshine patriots who disappear when the bullets start flying. And if you're going to defeat the giant, someone will have to say, we have the promise of God. Let's get ready to rumble. So, coming down to the home stretch, I have thought about this a lot the last couple of weeks, especially after my surgery. I ended up spending most of my time in BBR. Y'all know what BBR is? It's bed, bathroom, and recliner. We're not young anymore. Some of us are older than others. We can't kid ourselves. We're down to the last few minutes of our fourth quarter. And some of us closer than others. But the thing is, we don't know how much time we have. Or maybe just 30 seconds. It could be 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 30 seconds. We have to play like our whole life is on the line. Because it is. We don't have time to complain about anything. Coaches tell players to play through the whistle. And that's what we have to do. We got to get in the game and play hard and fast because we know our time is short. And if we do our part soon enough the game will end and the Lord will tell us the final score. I don't feel old every day, but I can't deny the passage of time. Mostly, I feel the loss of energy. When I was 30, my energy seemed like an inexhaustible well. Today, it feels like a balloon that has sprung a leak. I've got energy, but not nearly what I had 10 years ago. And it goes out quicker, and it takes longer to blow up the balloon. I've been pondering where I am in the race of life. I entered the starting gate 59 years ago. I rounded the first turn when I was about 25. And I spent a long time on the back stretch. But sometime in the last few years, I started down the home stretch. My whole life hangs in the balance. I have not yet finished the race, and I haven't won the prize. And as I come down to the home stretch of life, I'm not sure where the finish line is, except that it's somewhere in front of me. My job is to keep running hard until I cross that finish line. Your job is to keep running hard until you cross that finish line. In the ultimate sense, it doesn't matter when that happens. It doesn't matter whether it's today, tomorrow, or maybe even 25 years from now. The precise moment doesn't matter because I can't know it in advance. But what matters is that I find the strength from the Lord to play through the whistle and run through the tape. And we need the Caleb spirit today. The older we get, the more we need it. And I ran across this poem that sums up Caleb's story. He stood before Joshua with flashing eyes. Give me this mountain before I die. But Caleb, you're old and the mountain is high. Choose a peaceful spot on this plain to die. The people who live on the mountain are strong, and the battle you fight will be bloody and long. His eyes never wavered as he spoke without fear. I've been promised this mountain for 45 years. And as for the people being mighty and tall, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. For it's not my strength on which I'm counting. For the Lord is going to give me that mountain. So let's quit talking while it's still light. For the Lord and I have a battle to fight. With that in mind, let us resolve, no matter our age or station in life, that we will never release God's promise, never retire from serving God, and never retreat from the enemy. Let's keep going for Jesus with all the strength God has given us. I come back to the words, if you're not dead, you're not done. God still has work for you to do. May God fill us with the Caleb spirit today. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen.